Hey guys, welcome to another episode of PainPoints, where real pain equals real growth. Today is my first tutorial. Most of what I've done up to now is talking to other entrepreneurs and talking about their success and their pain points. What I really want to do is to teach business owners, not just tell you how I've made millions, but show you how I've made millions. Because I think it's one thing to do for my Sunday best and talk about all the success I've had, or business owners talking about the success, but I think it's vital that uh, I show you shoulder to shoulder exactly what I have done and exactly different concepts like gap accounting principles, lead nurturing, marketing, how to manage cash flow. So this first one's going to be on lead nurturing, and I'm excited to get started.
Are you stuck in that $3 to $10 million year-over-year revenue? Roofs in a Box is your all-in-one growth partner for modern construction companies. They combine AI, virtual staffing, and CRM solutions to help streamline operations. Replace your high fixed overhead with cost-effective systems and support. They empower you to run a smarter, leaner business, freeing up capital where it matters most. Mention this ad to save 10% on your next Roofs in a Box purchase. This episode of Pain Points is brought to you by Ringba. If your business relies on phone calls, you need to be working with them. Their technology will help you get the most money out of your marketing campaigns. Their call exchange, Ringba X, can deliver inbounds on demand to help grow your customer base. Now, I want to be transparent. Ringba and Adam did pay me to deliver that message, but I'm also a customer, and I've watched them help dozens of companies become more successful over the years. So if you sell a product or service over the phone, I guarantee a moment with their team will be worth it.
Okay, so the first episode we want to get into is lead nurturing. And this is really talking about different areas that you have to know about buying leads from marketing, or even just marketing principles in general. What a lot of people have is everyone keeps talking about marketing, marketing, more marketing. Where does my budget go? But I really want to talk about key KPIs and key numbers and processes that we need to know as business owners. Not just spend dollars, but how do my dollars affect my business? So the first thing I want to talk about is why is it important, processes and KPIs. So before we even look into buying leads, do we even have a process in order, right? Do we have SOPs? Do we understand lead nurturing? What happens when a call comes in versus the web submission? Do I have people that can answer the call then? When a web submission comes in, what's my speed to lead? If somebody's busy on a call, do I have subsequential call routing? Meaning that if I'm going to be the primary intake when somebody calls in, what happens if I'm busy? What happens if I'm in another meeting? Who gets the call next? And so forth, so on and so forth. Because when a live lead comes in, speed is everything, which we'll get into KPIs in just a second. So do you have, like, who answers the call? The second thing is, do you have AI handling inquiries? So if I don't answer, do I at least have an immediate response? So if somebody fills out a web form, do I at least reach out right away, say, how can I help you? Do I have a day parsing? What does that even mean? So for day parsing, meaning if I take lunch every day at 12 to 1, do I want to do marketing during 12 to 1? Or do I want to save budget from when I know I have somebody live answering the phone? What happens a weekend? Am I part-time or not? So if I'm only open from 9 to 6, do I have after-hour answering service so I can buy leads maybe when they're cheaper from like 6 to 9? Because a lot of people are looking for home services or products when, once they're off of work, when they can actually search more. And do I have documented SOPs like I talked about earlier? Is it replicable? A lot of people get in, they want to buy leads, and it's the business owner's fault that we're not working them correctly. If I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to call that lead while the person is in front of their phone putting in a web submission, I need to get a hold of that person while they're interested. Because quite frankly, is if I have an emergency or if I have a leak in my roof and you don't answer the phone, I'm calling 3 or 4 other roofing contractors because I just need somebody out here now to get the job done. So the reason why are SOPs and why is this process so important? And there's a couple of just quick reasons. One, it builds trust and credibility. If a customer sees me and sees my website, do I have a clean follow up process? Am I addressing their needs or concerns? Am I doing things where I keep the business top of mind? Meaning, am I quick? Am I professional? Am I answering their needs? Do I have cadences like even with AI? If somebody asks, "Hey, I have a leak in my roof," is the AI responding? Do you need the sales rep to come out with the tarp? Is there any immediate damage and needs that we need to address today? Right, just showing that you have some sort of cadence and process, that you know that you have the customer front of mind. And what this does essentially, it doesn't just increase lead conversion rates, it also shortens sales cycles. It makes them trust you. People move on because they don't trust or they want to get multiple bids, but people work with who they like ultimately. So if I can address these concerns, show some professionalism, and just have some cadences and processes just buttoned up, it goes a long way with expediting the sales process. One of the things I wanted to address is what are some of the early KPIs or indicators that if a marketing campaign is working well. A lot of times you want to know if the sale happens, but there's some things that happen way before the sale even takes place. So what I really want to go into is contact rate, set rate, which means how many appointments do I actually set over the phone, demo rate, which means how many people am I actually getting in front of and doing a live demo? How many live audience do I actually show up to and talk to the homeowners directly? Close rate, which is what do I actually close as far as completed sales, right? Like I met you, I like you. Do we move forward with business? And then I also want to talk about CPA, which is cost per acquisition, and then also ad ratio. A lot of companies don't talk about ad ratio. Most companies that I talk to talk about CAC, cost of acquisition cost. But I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But these are some of the things, the first three are indicators that what you have to look for when you first start a campaign while you let 4, 5, and 6 bake. And I'll get into that in just a second. So contact rate is essentially how many people do I actually get a hold of on the other line. So if I get 10 leads coming in and I get a hold of 2, like on a web lead, that means I have a 20% contact rate. And what are some of the early contact rates that we need to identify? So and this is actually how it affects spend. If I spend $75 a lead, that means if I get a hold of 2 people, I essentially spend $375 per contact, which is horrible, right? So a lot of times lower cost leads, you have to work through more to get a contact versus higher dollar leads should essentially work where you get in a much higher contact rate. So for instance, this varies by lead type. So contact rate or even set appointment rate is different for Meta versus search. So a good contact rate for LSA or Google leads range from 35 to 30 to 70%. With exceptional campaigns, I'm getting a hold of over 70%. Because if you think about like Google, for instance, if that's called directional marketing, means I Google somebody when I'm looking for a product or service now. Nobody Googles pizza when they're thinking maybe pizza. I need Domino's now. So somebody Googles roof or any home service, they're actively shopping for a product and service. So if they fill out a lead from directional marketing methods, essentially that should be a much higher contact rate because these are people shopping now for a product or service. So the first part is how quickly or how important is speed to lead? And I guess it depends on the lead type. So if I'm calling in, easiest way to say this is I should answer every single call. If I'm putting it into an answering machine, I've lost credibility. They've made a decision. They've already called 4 or 5 of my competitors. Whoever's the quickest to respond. Speed to lead is everything. So calls, you should always be able to answer a phone call. Secondly, is web submissions are more the quicker, the easier. It's not because I did a podcast a while ago and somebody was saying if I have to wait 5 minutes and respond to a web submission, then the difference between that web submission lead is exponential, meaning that if I call a Google lead and I'm getting 40% set appointment rate, if I can call within 5 minutes or even within 7 seconds, if I have to wait 5 minutes, that person has moved on to the next task. It's not because they weren't an active shopper, but now I went from a 30 to 40% set appointment ratio to maybe 7%. And if I'm paying a large amount of dollars for these lead types, it's important that I have that process set up, because a lot of times people blame marketing companies for it not working when it's really essentially the business owner. If I'm taking the calls and I'm on top of a roof doing the bid and I'm dealing with marketing, I shouldn't be answering phone calls. Or if I am busy during those times and it's a set time, I shouldn't be paying for leads during the times that I'm busy. So once again, set ratio is a little different than contact rate. Set ratio is how many leads that come in actually turn into appointments. Doesn't mean I actually demoed in or sent and cross with the customer. It means that I got somebody interested that said, yes, send somebody over. Now, meta leads range from 12 to 20% set rate. Now, they're usually exponentially cheaper than a Google lead. So the expectation should be that they're not as high quality, because people aren't necessarily going on Facebook looking for a roof or an HVAC. Essentially, they may see an ad and they think, "Oh, this is good. Let me reach out." So what you see, and it also depends on the type of ad, right? Or what am I marketing for? A replacement will get a different response than maybe underlayment, or tile roofs make it different than metal roofs. So the more specific the messaging is, you can expect lesser conversion rate. But in general, rule of thumb, if I'm buying leads from a marketing agency or an affiliate program or third-party aggregator, I should be looking at about 12 to 20% send rate. So for every 10 leads coming in, I should be looking at 1 to 2 leads as an early indicator to make sure that campaign is actually following normal cadences that I would expect for marketing. Now, the thing about, once again, if I wait, just kind of a disclaimer, is it the lead quality or is it my process quality? Because if I wait 5 minutes, that same 20% will fall sub 7%. So that's over 2/3 of a drop on performance matrix on send ratio if I wait too long to contact the customer. So Google, once again, with directional marketing is much higher, right? You should expect, because people are actively shopping for you. Like, once again, people don't Google for maybe a service. When they go on to Google, they're actively looking for a product or service. They may be researching, but they're an active buyer. So historically, what you see, Meta should be about 15% set ratio, but Google or YouTube should be roughly around 40%, maybe 30, but it should bake in at around 40% set ratio. Aggregate sites like Angie's List vary by market, and inbound calls like LSA should actually be north of 50%. Local listing services, those leads are cold. Now, web submissions on that perform drastically different than inbounds. We tend to only do inbounds, but once again, directional marketing is always going to be better than display or social media. Now, the next thing I want to segue into is ad ratios. Ad ratios are vital because it actually talks about what am I willing to spend to acquire a client. The way our commission structures are based in is that we take 10% of top line to go back into marketing spend, which means that I'm willing, for every $100,000 generated, I'm willing to spend $10,000 to acquire that. Now, this is great to know because as long as I'm not under a 10% ad ratio, I'll buy all day and every day from a certain vendor. But I know that going into the marketing campaign, what's a good campaign versus what's a bad campaign. So ad ratio should be determined prior to a campaign launching. Know what it means to win going in. I say this a lot with Socrates, like you can't go into a war not knowing what it means to what it means to win. Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, you need to define what it means going in, what it means to win. Otherwise, you're never going to win the war. Same thing with marketing. You got to understand exactly what it means to win in an ad campaign, which I'll break it down right now in just a second. Okay. So This is the later indicators, right? I gave you the KPIs on the three things that you look for when you start a campaign. Now, these are numbers that you're supposed to look at as you continue a campaign. Like, is this successful or not? And so the first one we want to look at is demos. So demos, it means that I set up an appointment and am I actually going to sit across from the homeowner to give my presentation? And the first thing that you look at is generally what you look at is 60% should be the minimum of a demo rate. There is about 10% that bake in later, so roughly around 70% overall, meaning 10% will say, let's reschedule for a later date. So 30% will just fall off like off the map, will ghost you and go with someone else. Someone's friend came in, they called multiple people and they just don't want to tell you no, so they don't show up or don't think they have to call you. And then 10% will actually have something pop up. And there's also cadences as well. Like sometimes they didn't talk to the husband or they didn't talk to the wife, right? So now all of a sudden the husband changes their mind or says, I don't want to do this. I have an uncle or second cousins, best friends, and Stock's previous owner that can do it for cheaper, right? And so those people are just not gonna happen. Or some businesses may have processes. Are they doing soft credit pools? Are they the homeowner? So some people may have higher set rates, but lower demo rates because they didn't because they may be filtering it more effectively, right? So they're not even showing up to leads that are maybe tire kickers or may ask some higher pre-qualified questions to eliminate the not ideal client upfront. But generally overall, you should have the initial set rates around that, and you should get about 60 to 70% demo rate as the leads bake in. The next thing that you're looking at is more of close ratios. And this isn't necessarily a lead quality issue. Sometimes it is. Sometimes, like in the South, for instance, in South Carolina, there's a lot of credit fails because they're dealing with lower socioeconomics, right? So those ones you should get cheaper leads because you're going to get just territorially or a scope of work or your territory where you're naturally going to get people that just can't afford or won't pass the credit check versus other people on close ratios. It's a sales issue, right? Overall, you should be looking at about a 20% close ratio. I know my better sales reps get 35 to 40% close ratios. And with internally as a company, we're north of 30%. But that's a sales training issues. So a lot of times this is where the company needs to take responsibility for quality. And last but not least, we need to look at CPAs. Now, a lot of times CPA gets misinterpreted with CAC, but CPA just means cost per acquisition. How much did it actually cost me to acquire this customer? I'm going to show you in a little bit after I get into ad ratio, how ad ratio and CPA are important and how to calculate it. But right now, what we're going to do is just look at what's a good cost per acquisition. CPAs are basically calculate based on the averaged signed job divided by the number of ad spend that you did to acquire the job. Now, if you have a $500 CPA, that's usually pretty good. But what if you only get repairs that are worth $1,000? That's not a good ad campaign because you're spending $500 for every $1,000 generated. That's not calculated. COGS, back end, commissions. There's a lot of things that go into running a company. So some things could be done in a loss leader. But overall, CPAs are usually a good indicator of, is this campaign working? But you should also look at variable different things like margins, commission structures, a compensation structure, and marketing budgets, which I can get into in a later podcast. So this is an Excel to kind of show down the different KPIs that I was talking about earlier. And I'll change this to kind of show you what it does to the matrix. So if I'm buying 50 leads from a marketing company, and this is a good measuring stick to see when I'm doing less the early indicators that they start sucking way too early, I'm going to stop the campaign. Let's say I'm paying $50 a lead. That means I spend $2,500 in total leads with a company or a marketing company. Now, this is how it changes ad ratio, CAC, CPAs. These are the different things to kind of monitor, but we're just going to talk about CPA and ad ratio. So if I set 30% appointment on a $50 lead, I'm on the bottom end of a Google campaign. That means I set 15 total appointments. I said it should be 60 to 70% demo. Let's say I'm bad at follow-ups. I'm only going to do 60% demo, which means I had 9 people that I actually presented. And let's say I'm a good close company and I close 35% of those jobs. So I close roughly 3 jobs in total. Let's say my average deal on a roof is $24,000. I'm in a middle to upper middle neighborhoods. I'm closing 24,000 asphalt roofs. There's going to be some higher, some lower, but let's say the median job is $24,000, which means I generated $75,600 in total revenue. So these are like trailing indicators to see if the campaign is working. So the first ratio I talked about was CPA, cost per acquisition. Now, if my cost per acquisition is $800, is that a good deal or not? Yes, because that means I'm at 3% ad ratio based by these KPIs. Now, I said I'm willing to go up to 10%. So what makes this campaign a good campaign versus a bad campaign? And let me just show you what happens if I change some of these indicators. Now, if I buy those leads and I get 20% set appointment rates, now all of a sudden I'm at 5% ad ratio. If I have a mediocre sales team and I close at 25% ad ratio, now I'm at 7% ad ratio and $1,600 CPN. So it still works with this number as long as I'm south of 10% because that's my budget. But let's say my average job now goes to, I'm in a smaller neighborhood or not as affluent roofs. As soon as I go into a smaller neighborhood, now it's still not horrible, but I'm 1% higher more than I wanted to spend on ad ratio. But my CPAs are still. So there's a lot of calculations that go in to what you want to look for. But I just wanted to kind of show you the things you need to look for and what basically makes a good campaign versus a bad campaign. So now let's talk about CAC. Once again, some people get CPA and CAC misconstrued. They think their CAC is lower than what it is. But cost of acquisition cost is basically a calculation that determines the total cost of a campaign and what it costs to acquire a client. And there's different things that go into that. And that's talking, and it's basically talking about over a certain period. So these are the parts that go into calculating CAC. Marketing spend, ad, ACO, direct mail, sales team salaries, how much should I commission out? CRM and software costs related to your sales and marketing campaign. Agency and contractor fees, lead generation cost, advertising creative and production costs, website and landing pages costs, marketing automation and email platform costs, call centers, any kind of overhead that goes into your sales process, training and onboarding, discount promotions, incentives. So these are basically in the entire calculations that go into it. And just to show you a quick example, if I spend $50,000 on marketing, $30,000 on sales expensive, and acquire 40 new customers, so to calculate CAC is total marketing cost, which is 50,000 plus 30,000 divided by the total new customers that I acquired equals CAC. So I've heard this number thrown out in multiple different ways, but I can tell you when people say they have $400 or $300 CACs, I'm like, I don't believe it because that means you have no overhead or operational costs or you're a one-man show. Stop. So this is an actual CAC for a roofing company that we have. I'll leave anonymous. This was a Q4 numbers. So if you look at the actual P&L of the things that went into this quarter, basically commissions, door knocking costs, advertising, vendor guests, social media, uniforms, hiring, recruiting, Rilla, which is an AI automation service it's a one-time fee. So that CAC that number will fall off Q1 CAC. Contribution to charities, whatever it is, these are the total expenses. And so divide that by 212 jobs signed for our roofing company, we did an average CAC of $4,074.46 for Q4. Now, Q3, that number went down 1,000 because there's certain costs that aren't in there anymore. Like, for instance, Rilla. That number's done for the rest of the year because it was already absorbed in Q4. But in general, what happens is CAC is good because it tells you what the average cost per acquisition is, but it doesn't calculate other factors like what's my average roof size, total revenue, am I doing higher ticket items, am I doing siding, am I doing a lot of repairs? So I love CAC, but I think sometimes it gets overplayed because I think CPA and ad ratio are much more effective at understanding early indicators if these campaigns are successful. But more importantly, is my company profitable? So I'm going to break this down a little bit more later down the line. These things will be live where I can answer questions, maybe dive in a little bit deeper into what do these acronyms mean if people want to get deeper into the weeds. But I really love my community that I'm building. I think these are real owners trying to make a real difference and a real impact. But if you guys can help, once again, like, comment, share, subscribe. It helps the algorithm. It helps me get in front of people. But more importantly, I just want to continue to put content out like this in front of people. Once again, I don't want to tell you how to make millions. Ultimately, I want to show you how to make millions. So once again, real pain equals real growth. Thank you for supporting.